Hello everybody, Skid3422 here, and today we'll be doing a tour of the quest build. But first, let's take a detour to the locker room, because if you go to the locker area, you'll find out that it's been decorated in golden trophy props, and that it even include the golden trophy itself. Sadly, you can't grab the trophy, but on the brighter side, if you look behind this crate, you can find a sword. Sadly, the sword doesn't fling stuff across the room. Anyways, getting back on track. Spawning in, we're presented with a lobby that looks very similar to the final version. The only few differences are, the chairs are dev textures and you can't sit on them, a lack of props, and broken textures. Did you know? The cutouts have stayed in the same position as they were in the quest build. Seriously, you can go back to Modern Rec Room and check for yourself. Anyways, the swords have a different texture that look more in line with the red variant of the sword. As I said before, they can't fling stuff. A little side note, you can do this cool little windmill thing. You can also do the same thing if you chuck the sword in the air. Talking about cool things, for some reason, the swords are extra bouncy and fly across the room. But don't let two swords collide with each other, it will break time and space, and probably your eardrums. The bows in the quest build are, well, I have a few choice of words to describe them, those words being, it's a piece of sh**! But in reality, the bow is just broken, and not in a good way. If you fire the bow just slightly faster than usual, it just breaks. I have no idea, but it just does that. On the brighter side, the bow's arrows leave pain on whatever they hit, and they also make a different sound when hitting something. Here, have a listen. Did you know that the fanfare for Quest is actually different from Golden Trophy's fanfare? Here, have a listen. Anyways, starting the game up, you're actually put on stage and have to go through this door to get to the changing room. Once in the changing room, you're presented with swords, 3 pots, a bow, and a crossbow. The crossbow is a pistol, but with a comically large riser, limbs, and arrow. Anyways, going through the first door, we're into the first act of Quest, which looks pretty close to the final build actually, except that the spawns are changed, introducing the flying goblins an act earlier. And this crate is in the middle of the hallway instead of to the left of the hallway. I forgot to mention that the only music you can hear is the explore music, because the combat music hasn't been implemented into the game yet. It's not even present in the files. You can check. The enemies look different, with the goblins sporting no textures, and the flying goblins being whatever they're supposed to be. I forgot to mention, they also just fly up to you and puke a fireball at you and just leave. They also sling different voice lines. Have a listen. Also talking about noise, the flying goblins have no audio cue, so they're even more of an annoyance to deal with. And to add insult to injury, apparently these goblins are ninjas too, because whenever they despawn, it blinds you. But there is a silver lining. For some ungodly reason, the bow says anything that it hits to the Shadow Realm, and a side effect of that is that it also breaks time and space. But mostly space, causing the goblins to float down until they land on something. The victory fanfare for this build is also different. Moving on, the second act is still somewhat unfinished, with beta textures littered everywhere, spawns being changed, and a lack of pots and a crossbow. Remember how I said that the bow broke time and space? Well, scratch that, because if the goblins go slightly airborne, they just fly off into the sunset. The rest of the act is pretty much the same as the final product, just with dev textures and once again, a lack of props. Moving on, Act 3 doesn't have its iconic boulder. Actually, it's just nothing. Seriously, it's just nothingness. You could call this a downward spiral. Other than that, the act is the same. Act 4 is completely different from the final release, having more of a castle courtyard feeling. But the fundamentals of the stage are still the same, those fundamentals being to introduce the Barrel Knights, which look like the Epic Quest Goblin but it gained 200 pounds and bought themselves a shield and an axe. An interesting thing about the Knights is that they act more like the Flaming Hot Cheeto variant and spin around instead of charging at you. Killing them is the same though. After you defeat the Knights, flying and normal goblins appear in waves, and after you're done with the waves, you're done with the act. Also, flying goblins like to get stuck here. I don't know why. Act 5 has the same gimmick as its final product, that being if you go to the right, you face tougher enemies, and if you go to the left, you face weaker enemies. Well, not really, the right side only has a Barrel Knight and a handful of pots. The left side, on the other hand, is pretty similar to its modern counterpart, but it lacks any form of cover. Exiting the left side, you're met with nothingness. The ending to Act 5 is surprisingly similar to its modern counterpart, having you duke it out with a mouthful of flying goblins. Did I also mention that there's no cover? After almost getting burnt to a crisp, you're presented with Act 7? What? There's a reason, but we'll get to that in a moment. The intro to Act 7 may fool you into believing that it lacks props, but if you round the corner and go to the left, you'll see props galore. Well, okay, not that much. And also there's an army at your doorstep. After defeating the enemies, you just walk down the cobweb hallway to get ambushed, and then you'll meet the iconic surprise Barrel Knight. After having a nice chat with him, you'll move on to the very end of the stage, which of course is very close to its modern counterpart. After defeating all the remaining enemies and going through the door, you're presented with Act 6? What? So, apparently the devs used Act 6 as the stage for the final boss. Talking about the final boss, it's just a giant flying goblin with a red circle on its back. For some reason, you can only inflict critical damage with the crossbow. Goblins are also supposed to spawn in, but I was too tired at the time of filming to go down and fight like a man. So after you defeat the final boss, you just win, that's it. You get teleported back to the lobby, and the feeling of, oh my god, did I just waste like 20 minutes doing that? Starts to sink in. And that's it. Until next time, goodbye.